The Secure in Mind podcast series is an educational initiative of the Cybersecurity Advisors Network, or CIAN. CIAN is an international not-for-profit trust network of experts in technology, policy, ethics, and good practice. Our mission is to strengthen society's safety, resilience, and ability to fight against cybercrime and similar threats. Visit us at cybersecurityadvisors.network. Hello, and welcome to the latest in the Cybersecurity Advisors Network series of Secure in Mind video and podcast conversations. This is a set of very, very informal, friendly chats with various personages, subject matter experts, consultants, managers, technicians, what have you, in the cybersecurity space around the world, with interesting things to say about this very, very broad and fascinating topic. And I'm joined today for an episode that's been exciting me for quite a while. I'm here with Juan Ignacio Nicolossi in Chile, team leader for threat intelligence at PRODAFT, a cyber threat intelligence company headquartered in the Netherlands. Full disclosure, PRODAFT are a part-time client of mine. I really like them. They're a great company with some great people. I just want to give them a shout out. And today we're going to be talking about Snatch Ransomware. This is not going to be an in-depth technical podcast. There's plenty of information from various cyber threat intelligence and virus sites around the internet. You can find that for yourself. What we're going to have today is a bit of a broader conversation about some of the special aspects and the deeper implications of various elements and behaviors of the Snatch group and their technologies. So, Juan, if you want to introduce yourself, talk a bit about where you came from, who you are, what you do, and then we'll move on to the topic at hand.
Well, thank you for inviting, John. It's a really good opportunity, and we really thank you both in the company and for the threat intelligence team to be here. As I told you before, I'm the team leader for the threat intelligence team for the PDI team. We've been working around for a couple of years and developing new techniques and new approaches in order to be able to enrich the concept of threat intelligence, not just focusing on the merely technical aspects, the collection of IOCs and mostly the understanding of certain groups, but actually trying to go a little bit further and have deeper methods of understanding their behavior, their motives, and especially attribution. That's our ideal work environment, trying to reach a level of attribution, whether it's general or specific, that would allow us to add that little piece of cherry on top, going a little bit further than most of our, let's say, not competitors, but other people in the environment are able or are willing to go to.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And yeah, it's good to that we can actually talk about intelligence, because a lot of times when people mention threat intelligence, they actually just talk about dumping technical indicators. Whereas what we're interested in is kind of the more contextualized information, the so what, the analysis of this. So maybe for a little bit of background on Snatch, it's a ransomware that's been going around for quite a while. I've seen it listed in open source intelligence sources since 2018. I'm going to just read off a couple of attributes, and we're going to use that as a basis for discussion. So I'm going to invite everybody to draw their own conclusions from this conversation. So what I see it mostly referred to is a ransomware as a service group. Previously GandCrab affiliate, for those of you who are familiar with that group, just under a different name. They were listed in several sources as Russian, even coordinating with the Russian government. I've not seen any concrete confirmation of that, but for example, Recorded Future and others have them confirmed as Russian. So again, I'll leave that to you. Generally considered to target a lot of critical infrastructure sectors, using RDP, remote desktop protocol, to brute force admin credentials if they can't get it from malicious forums, and gain presence on victim networks. Use a custom ransomware to boot into safe mode, evade detection, and other countermeasures. So fairly sophisticated. They use a lot of VPNs, and one of their common modus operandi is double, and I believe even triple extortion, which is not only encrypting data and charging money to recover it, but also, threatening leaks and exposure of sensitive information, personal identifying data, customer data, et cetera. Especially given the fact that they're targeting so many critical infrastructure actors, that's an interesting aspect. I've also seen on a site called ransomlook.io, which has a lot of really good resources about and Snatch, mentions of what I think is a really mean thing that they do, which is they actually explicitly thank people in the organizations that they've hit with their job roles, sometimes LinkedIn profiles, sometimes email address. Specifically, these are the people who they say have clicked on malicious links and attachments to help them get in, which I just think is really, really mean and unnecessary. But you do you. So anyway, with that kind of an overview, like I said, this is just from a CISA, US CISA Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency report on the group from September. And, I would like to give you the floor. Why don't you talk a little bit about who these guys are, what some of their key defining attributes are that you've seen, and, if there's anything in here that you can or cannot confirm or deny. I have to be very, very clear here that what we're discussing here is purely TLP traffic light protocol white. Everything publicly available, open source intelligence. There's obviously some things that Juan cannot disclose. And so we're not going to go into sensitive topics, but like I said, if you want to give kind of a summary of your observations and your views of these guys.
Well, you did a great summary of the entire technical aspects of Snatch group, but I would like to start with why it's important, why we're looking at Snatch on the first place. So, first of all, the fact that they're data leakers, we can put it like that. Their main power comes from stolen data and being able to distribute it freely through the internet. Well, they have their webpage and everything, but the important part is that within them, we're able to change a little bit the concept strictly from ransomware to a ransom group. It's a little bit of a difference because they are not, in most of the cases, originally encrypting the data. They're just silently going in and silently going out, stealing the data, and then posting it, as you said, thanking those people that made available, whether they are RDP credentials or they click some link and everything in their webpage. So when we talk about Snatch, it's better to talk about a ransom group and not a ransomware group. So that's the first distinction. And it's from a certain perspective, it's if we see the model that they use within their business structure, that is extortion, it's kind of really interesting to see a group that it's trying a little bit of old school techniques, just skipping a little bit on their origins when it comes to ransomware itself, encrypting the whole data and blocking the users to be able to access them, and actually publish free samples to be able to immediately start pressuring the victim in order for them to pay. But the victim is not being pressured because of the encryption. It's mostly being pressured because of the leakage of that information. Okay, so that's a kind of unique model that we've seen before also with Karakut, but in a certain way makes them kind of a little bit of a difference between most of the models that we're seeing today of, as you say, like double or triple extortion when it comes to not just encrypting the information, but then threatening with other levels of filtering it. So it's kind of interesting from that point of view. Then when we move all the way to the business model per se, we're talking about real negotiating tables. Okay, negotiating chats where the entire strong position from the beginning, it's for the Snatch group. And that makes them also pretty interesting to analyze all the information that they actually read it. They are able to identify within those set of data important information in order to push the victim, not just in order to pay, but to actually create a sense of fear that there's where the victim knows that there's important information in there, not just because of company strategies or company business per se, or databases of people. We're talking about the implication of certain information that can be granted to other people with different interests on the same package of information. So it's kind of really interesting seeing a player once we're able to gain visibility to certain parts of their infrastructure, the way they behave. It's really unique. They have their technique, and actually people reading and understanding the importance of different parts of the information that they stole. It's not just about encrypting. It's about actually pushing the boundaries of what's the importance of the information itself. And most groups do not do that. Most groups are over there about just the encryption, the payment, and we go out. And that makes them not just important, but makes them kind of a case study that it's pretty interesting. And it caught our attention because of that. That's where we're talking beyond the technical aspects. We're talking more about the behavioral conduct of the team. As you're saying, we work in cyber intelligence, and within that we have the threat intelligence team. But we also try to look for a broader perspective when analyzing a team. And behavior analysis is also a point of view, and this case actually gives us a little bit of extra points that kept our attention.
So quick question. I mentioned earlier, like I said, in my description, it came up as a ransomware as a service group. And I've seen that mentioned in quite a few open source intel, sources. When we had our preparatory chat, you said rather not the case. Now, what I've seen is that there's a blog that puts a lot of ransomware samples out there. There's a Telegram channel. I think, they also put stuff from Conti. Samples from Conti out there, and they're also called Snatch or Team Snatch, but I think both of them have said we're not affiliated with each other really. So is that maybe where that confusion came from, where it's really a ransom group being described as a ransomware as a service organization?
I don't think there's a per se mixed up. I think that sometimes groups tend to evolve. I think that they're starting with their extortion model and eventually realized that it wasn't enough in order to capitalize on the money of that, and they moved towards double extortion. So, but we're talking about the origins and the frame of time that we were able to gain visibility. And at that time, what we discovered was focusing on those cases where extortion was the main part of their business model when it comes to the importance of the information and not the importance of the encryption per se. And they still put their bases on that part of the segment. They are looking in order to extort people because of the quality and the type of information they gain, even beyond the encryption model. So they might be a change of names in the sense of competing teams and everything, or it just might be a coincidence. But we do think that for them to capitalize, eventually they were going to have to move towards a model with encryption included. So might be that kind of work. But we're focusing on the time that they used to do only extortion by posting the information that they have. And also, if you check their webpage, like I can give you the webpage later, their main goal is publishing the information next to them and exploiting the fact that information is available to the public. Okay. So, and also if you read a little bit of their public notice in the group, let me pull it up right here. it's extremely interesting that their public notice starts by saying the Snatch group, and number one, is a leakage database open for the public use. Okay. So that's the real pressure. Okay. Is the fact that they leak. Okay. Besides the entire ransomware concept, there's a ransom concept that it's more important from them. And that's they are able to achieve it through leakage of that information.
So on continuing on that note, there was a news item making the rounds the last couple of days from Alfie Black Cat, which I thought was entertainingly creative as a business model, where they actually submitted a regulatory complaint against a victim who wouldn't pay up because they were leaking. I don't remember if it was HIPAA sensitive healthcare private data in the US or something like that. It was some kind of private data where the organization would not pay the ransom. And so the threat actor leaked information. And because now the information is out there because of the victim's refusal to pay, the ransomware guys submitted a regulatory complaint which I thought was incredibly interesting, a little bit sad and amusing in a sad way. But it also speaks to this approach of critical data and extortion, under the threat of publication. Do you think this is part of a broader trend of more ransomware actors not just saying, we'll encrypt your data, your family photos, your business data, but we'll leak it? Or is this more kind of an exotic phenomenon with a few one-off actors?
Let me start by referring to the phenomenon and not to other posts because I'm only allowed to speak when it comes to what we saw. But definitely it's might not be a trend itself, but it's definitely a different technique in the sense of exploiting the value of the information. Because we need to understand that some companies are going to be commercial and their value of their information are just going to be, as we said, like maybe trade secrets, maybe databases of clients, stuff like that. But there are also other companies that they're going to have information that can impact whether it's public behavior, public policy, or even legal responsibilities that those companies have to take those databases. In this case, you're talking about healthcare, of course. There's an extra level within legal regulations in every country when it comes to securing databases of patients. Okay. So when they are able to identify that there's value, not just for the company in order to recover the information, but value to a regulator in order to push against that company because of failing to protect that information, of course, they bring it up to the table as a negotiating tool. They are actually able to identify value not just for the victim, but for other parties. And that's the real beauty of what they do, in the sense of being able to exploit and identify that the data that they extract might have value to some third parties also, not just for the victim. And that takes brains behind it, because it also, within game theory, it would change the position immediately of the victim, because the victim is not just worried about recovering the information or recovering the systems, but immediately cannot assess fully the third parties that might be interested in that information. And there are actually third parties that will consider that the value, it's even higher than the one from the victim. And they will be able either to pay for it or either to reach to the threat actor in order to obtain that information. And the threat actor will be able to multiply the value against the victim, because now there are third parties entering the game. And if you're going to push, in this case, when you have public information for patients, as you were mentioning, it's even harder, because now there's not just interest on information of patients by a third party. There's value in the sense that the victim can of a situation where they might have broken the law. So the regulator gets involved, and that's extra pressure. on the victim. So maybe before, just by themselves, were able or willing to pay 10. Now that they might get a sanction from a third party because of the, in order to avoid that sanction, they're maybe able to pay 20, just to give broader perspective of how it changes the position. And they actually do it. They have negotiating chat rooms that are basically the unique way that they express that they're submitting their negotiations. They work beautifully, and they take advantage of that positioning. So
let's pursue that third party aspect of it, because if you look at their known or at least alleged victims list, again, I'm purely going on open source intelligence here, or OSINT. There's a lot of fairly banal organizations. You know, as a music lover, it pains me that there's a couple of symphony orchestras and operas in there. But you know, things like local school districts, advertising firms. But you know, there's a couple that really jumped out at me, which is, for example, the South African Department of Defense, right? Or Ingenico, which is a major part of the French payments ecosystem. So when you talk about third parties, and given that, you know, there's observations that these guys, again, this is from the CISA report, I will link to in our description. There's comments that these guys really target critical infrastructure components, critical national industries, critical national infrastructure participants. Ports of Mauritius is another one that jumped at me. You know, there it doesn't just become a regulatory issue, but it becomes a national security interest. Right. So all of a sudden you've not only got the regulator who's after you because you are potentially a source of leaks for confidential healthcare data, sensitive intellectual property, subjecting it to industrial espionage, yada, yada, yada. But you're actually exposing potential national cyber defense capability, or the stability of whether it's a national electric grid or again, a banking ecosystem. If you look at the European Union's NIS2 directive, they list something like, I believe it's about 29 or 27, something like that, key sectors of the economy that have a specific regulatory interest as being key to, you know, collective cyber resilience and cyber defense. So at what point do not just the regulators, but, you know, your national cybersecurity agencies, your armed forces even get involved and have an interest in making sure this is either, if they can't prevent it or resolve it, at least minimizing damage?
Well, let's take the example that you're saying and work within the defense military industrial complex of different countries, not just focus on South Africa. Nowadays, it's impossible to have a good army if you're not also developing capabilities, technologies in order to use as a force multiplier in order to defend yourself. So when we're talking about an infiltration from a company within the development of technologies, materials, whatever the company is working on, as you said, there's not just value on the commercial aspect, on the financial aspects of the earnings of the company. You might be involved in the leakage of state secrets. You might be involved in something that it's maybe future secret projects with weaponry or new materials. And immediately, once published or available to the public, you don't just lose databases or stuff like that. You're losing a tactical or even a strategic advantage in front of other countries that might be an adversary or potential adversary to yourself. That's the reason why you develop these kind of technologies. So it's a huge problem when the value of the information has a huge impact also for, let's talk about public interest. Okay. Whether that public interest will be on private information being leaked or national security. When it comes to national security, you're going to be able to immediately understand that there's a whole environment that it's going to get worried. Not just the military industrial complex itself, but the armies of that country, also politicians. These can spread pretty easily, pretty fast. And the level of vulnerability from the victim, it tends to go tenfold. And within that, if you have people that actually are able also on the threat actor side to understand how that information might have value to different parties and how to exploit it, something that was willing to be cost one, it becomes something that costs 1,000 immediately. So the value goes up because the stakes in that information are way big. And that's the important part, how the threat actor is able to understand that there's value not just for the victim, there are value for other parties. And the consequences for the victim of that information being released are way bigger than just talking about a payment for ransomware. This is not just about the ransomware. It's not just about the ransom. It's about being able to put in the table of negotiation that if they don't pay, there are other people that will pay one way or another. Okay. They can pay, they can pay with money, of course. Third parties interested, maybe competitors interested in that. Or they can pay by giving information to public news outlets that eventually will engranger their name. Because they make their name public, eventually they feel more entrusted for future victims to actually understand the power of the group itself and make them more willing without having to think about the exposure. These guys are serious. So it's a lose-lose situation in every single aspect when you're talking about companies or different sectors being affected by this group, that their information has extra value. It's not just a commercial value. And they are not just able to identify that value, are able to exploit it on the negotiating table. So I insist, it's not just extortion, it's the capability of negotiate as professionals also. So that makes it adversary, a threat actor that should not be underestimated. And I'm not trying to inflate them or anything. I'm just trying to put the fact when there are brains behind a threat actor.
Well, we've known for years that a lot of malware gangs have increasingly become professionalized. I mean, we've all seen, everybody who's been to security conferences and malware related presentations has seen the charts of how they have organizations that are modeled after commercial firms. I wish Windows would shut up with its alerts. Sorry, I don't know how to turn that off. And Microsoft, if you're listening to this. But I think what I really appreciate in your statement was this idea of that you touched on briefly, of the extortion is no longer just we will publish the information, but we might find somebody who's willing to pay more for who's more. So the information isn't actually published. So you don't even really know what's been extorted, but we may sell it to the country. And that brings me to a bit of wild speculation on my part that I'm not going to ask you to comment on unless you really want to, right? Because this is potentially sensitive. So just bear with me for a second. What I find really fascinating about these guys, about this particular example is again, we've known for a while that especially with Russian groups, that are not state run, we have, an increasing level of affiliation with the Kremlin, whether it's, Wagner operatives, whether it's independent groups. Russian government tolerates these as part of their weaponization of cyber warfare. And if you talk to the military guys, they will really rigorously avoid the terms war or attack, because these are very loaded in a military sense. Whereas if you're coming from the private cyber defense sector, like I am as a pure civilian, cyber attack is normal. So for us, basically, you're always in this state of conflict. You're being attacked, whether it's by a state actor or a hacktivist or whatever. You don't really care, except to understand their tactics, techniques, procedures, TTPs. What I find really fascinating about these guys is this potential that this is not just a criminal extortion and ransom enterprise, but actually something that has a kind of a dual purpose of being weaponized by a potentially hostile government, right? So you're able to undermine key capabilities in critical industry, whether it's private industry or government agencies as a part of critical national infrastructure. As you say, this common interest, as part of a criminal operation, right? So kind of dual usage technology, if you will, right? So you're actually using it for criminal gains as well as for almost kind of a military offensive purpose. So I'll just throw that out there. If you want to comment on that, great. But, I think that's a bit of a sensitive topic to touch on, because that probably involves a lot of TLT red information. What I did want to ask you is, I can comment a little. I'm very careful with how I phrase these things, because I work with a lot of Intel folks in the past. So I just want to make sure that nobody feels like they have to, I've seen a lot of these talks, and I just want to make sure that you're comfortable. What I do, however, want to do is give you the floor to talk about any aspects of Snatch as an example that you think are particularly significant that we haven't touched on yet, and anything that is indicative for any future predictions of where this is going.
Okay. First of all, I do want to talk about a little bit of what your hypothesis is. I kind of confirm nor deny, especially in public. We can talk enough all the theories that we would like, but I will get myself away from especially when we're talking about Russia and the Kremlin and the relationship to threat actors, mostly because it's an ongoing thing. It has a lot of media attention because of the war in Ukraine, and we're not to jump into that train. Okay. Speculations are one thing, but we're intelligence, or operators. So we try to deal with the facts that we have on the table. So I'm going to avoid.
I'm a little biased because I just recorded another podcast with a Ukrainian disinformation expert. So please forgive me my little wander into the woods of speculation.
I think it's good, but we can talk about the theory behind it and avoid putting names on that part. When we talk about cyber war, we're talking about an aggressive act between state actors. Okay. It would be country A, country B. Okay. It's an authorized military action against another country. Okay. When we're talking about cyber warfare, it's the art of warfare in cyberspace. Okay. And that one can be executed not just by the states, but third parties related to them without an official declaration or an official, relationship with the country.
I like that distinction. I'm going to note that. So thanks for that.
Oh, no problem. So, on theory, when it comes to cyber war, we might see an action that it will be, a public knowledge by the countries that are involved. Like in the case of 2007, when Russia against Estonia made an attack by using cyber weapons. In this case, we're talking denial of services. We're talking about real hack and alteration of critical infrastructure. But in general, under the Russian government were able to say, yeah, it was us and we're playing with new toys. Okay. 2007 case. Okay. Not now. But in the case of cyber warfare, when the application of the art, we cannot say that there are third parties that are not playing within the environment of a war itself, trying to benefit the side that they represent. And this is important also because whether you are within the military structure or you're not, there are third parties that are also interested in protecting or representing the interests of their countries. So that's why we see hacktivism groups also disseminating information on the Ukrainian war, stuff like that. And some of them are Russian affiliated and the other ones are Ukrainian affiliated. That's what we're seeing right now, with the conflict in Israel, with Palestine, where we have a lot of hacktivist groups taking positions on one side to the other and disseminating what they will call the information that it's important for them, for the public to know. But we know that there is also disinformation running around by those groups. So the art of war is not exclusive to the states, okay? But the states are the ones who declare war.
Fair enough.
Fair enough? Okay.
It's a good analysis. So we got about 3.5 minutes before my lame Zoom subscription cuts us off. So if you want to give us some final analysis to wrap up the complex situation.
When it comes to Snatch, to be honest, sorry, I'm just gonna take a couple of what I'm authorized to say, separating it from what I'm not. But the important part is for us to acknowledge the fact that it's a threat actor that it's important to take seriously. First of all, it's a threat actor that we know it must evolve in their techniques in order to be able to cash in faster and better. The extortion is not enough. Depriving the victims from the access of the information is also important. When they're trying to capitalize. So we think that they're going to be moving toward maybe smaller targets that are willing to pay faster, and also to a double, triple extortion model that we already seen in news. But what we saw within our investigation was focused within the extortion, I insist, not within the encryption scheme. And final thoughts about it is groups are different on their behavior. Okay. They do not, some of them might just want information in cash. Some other ones are able to find other ways to capitalize in the stolen data. And the important thing for that is that potential victims, need to understand that there's not, when they are being hit by a ransomware, they're not just being deprived of the access to their system. They need to understand that there's within that system, there might be information that they might have a value through third parties of public interest. And they need to get ahead, not just on the stolen information, but in the discourse that it can be created against them if that information is leaked. So that's why, we try in PRODAFT to not just focus on the emergency itself, on the stolen information and deprivation to your access, but also to understand what's going to come forward. Our job is to tell you what's coming forward. That's the real essence of intelligence. And as a future threat, it's not enough to focus on the decryption of your system and requesting the information. It's always extremely important to see the effects that information might have if leakage. Okay. So we try to help. We try to help in the full spectrum of the situation, not just, undoing the problem for your system. Excellent. It's confronting a full situation. Okay. We need to have the full view of it.
Now, thank you for that. And of course, all the usual recommendations apply. Know the value of your information, have backups, have security controls in place, especially if you're a small organization. Know your law enforcement, your security vendors. And with that, I want to thank you kindly for joining us today. Thanks, everybody. Check out our website, cybersecurityadvisors.network, and stay safe, and see you on the next time.
See you. Thanks for inviting. Take care, bro.
Thank you for joining us in this latest edition of the Secure in Mind podcast series, courtesy of the Cybersecurity Advisors Network. Visit us at cybersecurityadvisors.network/media and /blog for additional episodes and articles. Follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, SoundCloud, Podcast Republic, and iTunes, and don't hesitate to get in touch. Stay safe, stay smart, stay educated, and stay secure.